Welcome, everybody, to the first of what I hope to be many insider community practice sessions. Today, we have Ali Tataryn, who's a counselor, somatic educator, and coach who guides clients through somatic emotional release and helps them map their internal emotional landscapes for healing and self development. Ali brings over 15 years of practice as a Tibetan meditation practitioner and more than 10 years of experience facilitating relational work. We'll start with Ali sharing a presentation on the Bio-Emotive framework, a groundbreaking approach to processing and clearing emotions stored in the body. And from there, we'll move into breakout rooms and get a chance to practice emotional processing in small groups. And we'll return to share our experiences and open into a group discussion, exploring how this work can bridge personal, interpersonal, and spiritual development, especially in these turbulent times. Ali, floor is yours.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Artem. Yeah, thanks, everyone. Nice to be here. Nice to be connecting with you all. I will just share my screen and we'll get going. So I'm here representing today my father's work in the Bio-Emotive framework and emotional processing. And we are talking about it within the context of turbulent times, essential wisdom for personal growth, deeper relationships, and spiritual development. We'll talk more about that and what that means. So the Bio-Emotive framework, its roots are in Gendlin's processing, the works of Gurdjieff, sacred dance, Western psychology, meditation, McLean's triune brain, my father's time in sensory deprivation tank research, and his love for, at the time, you could say paranormal or the body-mind connection. And I would say that he was developing his work around the same time that parts work was getting developed, dance therapy, attachment therapy, different elements of CBT. And basically anything that wasn't CBT was just called alternative therapies. And so he's very much just, a brother alongside, Porges' work and Bowlby and all of this. And now, in the last 15 years, all of this work is kind of coming to the mainstream and to the public. And my father is in that as well. So the Bio-Emotive framework, its origin story is my mother, who is also, she's an expressive therapist and meditation teacher. She came home from seeing her clients and she said, Doug, it doesn't matter who they are, how much money they have, where they're from. It always comes down to the same things. My father really heard that. He was transitioning from doing statistical analysis into a private practice and working one-on-one with clients in private practice. And so he took his, statistical mind and he basically just started taking notes on what are the words that people start to cry on? What are the words that when he says, hey, he was doing Gendlin's focusing. And so Gendlin's focusing is you slow down, you tune into the body and you just explore. Are there sensations coming up? Is there a color? Is there a quality? Is the sensation moving? Is there an image that's arising? So on and so forth. And he would do this work and he would say, does that capture the essence of your pain? Or is there something else? And they would tune in, they would check with their bodies and they would go, no, there's something else. And so they would do another round and they would keep going. And basically, sometimes people started to cry deeply and have a major catharsis and clearing, and their life changed. And he got really interested in that. So he started to write down what are the words that cause people to do this. And of course, you know, why? So around the same time, he learned about McLean's triune brain theory. And basically, he just started to put things together. So he found, geez, over 3 years, there seemed to be 9 core feelings that cause people to cry and have transformation. Okay, well, what about every other feeling? Right? Why these feelings? Is there an order that these feelings work in? Is there some logic? He really believed if you can't put it in a picture, it probably isn't clear enough. So his framework developed, and this is what we now call the Bio-Emotive framework. So essentially, seeing yourself. According to the Bio-Emotive framework, under every issue that we're having, there's an unacknowledged core or interpersonal feeling based on feeling beliefs that come from impressions that were generalized about who we are and how the world works, and they need to be updated. Feeling beliefs and impressions can be shaped by how we interpret the data that we have. How we interpret the data we have is shaped by our family, our culture, our transgenerational trauma and transmissions. So, what does all this mean? Basically, what his contribution or his shift away from the regular CBT or other practices is that in order for a real transformation to change, you have to fully tap into the body and not just feel what's happening in the body, not just see images, not just kind of shift around and kind of be in this amorphous state, but you need to be able to specifically identify what are one of the 9 core feelings that is secretly underlying the issue that you are struggling with. Okay? When we can identify one of the 9 core feelings, we then want to allow our bodies, we want to not block our bodies from feeling the agitation or the activation in the nervous system. And we want to actually encourage crying to take place. In my dad's framework, there's 5 levels of crying. And basically, it's just from like a basic tear to like a full on, full body sob and reliefs. So, why does this matter? Basically 15, 20, 25 years ago now, people were not allowed to cry. You could get hospitalized for crying. So he was really saying this has to be acknowledged, okay? We have to learn how to go deeper than just mindset shifts. We have to go deeper than talking about our story or going straight to changing our behaviors. We need to learn how to somehow integrate the intellectual brain, the emotional brain or the limbic system, and the body coherently. Is everyone's following? Because now I'm going to start weaving this into the metacrisis. Okay. So emotional intelligence is responsibility. So we're in a major, major change right now. The world is shifting from hierarchical chains of command into an interconnected web of empowered people with permission to go out and start their own lives. And with that permission, the ability to navigate relationships is essential. Relationships used to be navigated by everyone adhering to social rules or religious rules. But with those rules becoming too restrictive and everyone being out on their own, allowed to follow their own truths, that means all of our truths are bumping up against one another. So this means we are now navigating people with different value systems, different upbringings, different life assumptions, which are sourced from different family patterns, cultural teachings, traumas, and the educations that they're being exposed to. The Bio-Emotive framework can be used as an essential tool to know yourself, your values, your conditioning, your assumptions, so that you can actually work with them more effectively when you're working with other people. AKA, you can learn how to not bring your garbage to everybody. So very simply on the surface, in the meta crisis right now, we're seeing depression, aimlessness, meaninglessness, uprisings, wars, poverty, so on and so forth. Driving mechanisms are economic systems prioritizing extraction, political polarization, resource, and the meaning crisis, the widespread loss of coherent frameworks and understanding purpose. From here, that's being drawn from shifts in collective patterning, lineage wounds, and so forth. Okay. So if everyone can take a look at this. In our framework, we take a look at what judgments, cliquing, signs of activations that we're having. And we have to look beneath that. What stories are coming up underneath that? What emotions are there? What interpersonal feelings are there? And what core feelings are there? So let's see here. What are we hearing? What are the things that we're hearing from the presentation so far? What's standing out? And then I'll take some next steps into an exercise soon. Yeah, Ali.
That's so cute. That the crying leads to, like, a full expressive cry leads to some evolution.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. The body needs to have a shift, not just the mind. Yep. And what does that mean? The body needs to have a shift, not just the mind.
It would be embedded in the nervous system and then released.
Yeah. What else are we hearing? And maybe I'm okay with you guys unmuting and just going popcorn style for this part.
Well, I'm hearing that when there is some kind of interpersonal conflict, there's usually a need that's not being met.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Processing our emotions is the key to opening us up to relational freedom. Which is
I love the line that we're bumping into each other's values. I think, however you said it, bumping up against each other.
Yeah. Yeah. And so it's popular right now. It's popular right now for people to be very clear in setting their boundaries. Okay. Hey, this is okay with me. This is not okay with me. And this is a way of saying, hey, I don't want to be stepped on anymore. I don't want to be, restricted in what I'm able to do. One of the limitations in the approach of, okay, we're going to set boundaries is that it's often, it's an attempt for people to empower other people, okay, to be able to say no. But when we have people trying to set boundaries with other people who are trying to set boundaries who don't really understand what's going on inside of their inner emotional landscape, there's a lot of bumping up against each other rather than finding points of connection and communication to clarify what's going on. Okay. So what is important is notice, okay, I want to set a boundary with this person. Take a moment, check your body. What's going on in your body? Am I feeling happy? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling angry? Or am I feeling fearful? Okay, how do I know I'm feeling one of these things? In a normal situation, without having some amount of mindfulness training or some amount of emotional processing, we basically get tense, we either notice it or not, and we start assessing the situation about what that person needs to do, okay, as we're now empowered to set boundaries, okay? But what is often more helpful in actually building better relationships and having boundaries that are not just cutting people off is you stop, you notice your signs of activation. Okay, I notice I'm getting frustrated and I want to set a boundary right now. Take a breath. Okay. I'm getting irritated, I'm speaking up, I'm starting to push away. I might ask myself, what stories are involved here? Or in our case, we would go a little bit deeper. We would say, what interpersonal feeling am I feeling that I'm uncomfortable with, that I don't know what to do with? Am I feeling abandoned by this person? And so I'm trying to puff up and show them that I can take care of myself? Am I feeling neglected by this person? So that, and am I basically afraid of feeling my neglection? So I'm pushing them away, or I'm running away. I'm feeling neglected and I'm feeling so helpless about it, which is a core feeling, that I'm running in another room, right? And I'm not communicating my boundaries at all. Okay. So what starts to happen is when you can actually use this as an internal map when you're navigating relationships, and I think I'll just do a regular screen share here because it's easier for me. When I notice that I'm activated, okay, and when I'm feeling the need to set a boundary, I automatically know, according to our framework, oh my gosh, there's an interpersonal and a core feeling getting activated in me that I'm not aware of. So if I can do my personal work before going to the person that I'm in a conflict with, I can basically discharge a whole lot of the struggle that's in my body and a whole lot of the desire, like a whole lot of the anger, for example, reduce it, and then I can approach this person with much more skillfulness, wisdom, intelligence, and compassion. Okay. So I'm going to have, and everyone's following me. Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder. Actually, Joe wrote something. I wonder maybe you could speak
Okay.
speak to this. He wrote that I might propose that from an NVC perspective, that abandoned and neglected are judgment words, not feeling words. And I think this is pretty interesting because I hear people talk differently about these kind of things. That like a feeling is, well, that's not really a feeling. That's like an interpretation. But yeah, I wonder what you would say to that.
Yeah. So thanks, Joe. That's a really great conversational point. So, in our framework, we use the word feeling. There's sensational feelings, which is like in the body. Oh, I feel warm. I feel cold. I feel tense. I feel loose. Um, and then there's emotional feelings. And so, in our framework, emotional feelings are based on social survival and just survival, which I will not get into. Um, And while there is maybe a judgment or an assessment in the, sense of abandonment, what we have found is that feelings and emotions developed in the limbic system and are pre-rational. They developed before the neocortex. And so interpersonal and core feelings are literally pre-rational. You can feel a sense of someone without really understanding or being able to label it. You just know that for some reason you feel a little bit uncomfortable and you want to move away. Or you just know that for some reason you're drawn to somebody. So feelings are a rudimentary, pre-verbal language of the emotional system that we are now bringing the intellect in to help put words to what the nervous system is already feeling. So basically, somatic experiencing and polyvagal theory is really, really popular right now. Popular, I mean, it's truth, right? But it's being popularized, right? And one way that you could say it is that every time we go into a fight flight response, we are actually activating one of the core feelings that humans are wired to feel within the nervous system. And that if we can put language to this subconscious experience in the nervous system, that it will relax and feel a moment of relief. And in that moment of relief, there becomes an opportunity to update the impressions or rewire the outdated assumptions that were hidden inside of that muscle tension or that activation. So, what we've found is that, yes, there is an element of like cognitively breaking it down, but you can know that someone loves you and still feel unloved. And that's a really important element of this. And this is where it somewhat ties into parts work. Part of me is feeling dismissed by so and so, even though I know they value me. Okay. So, what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to give space to the. So, what happens is people oftentimes they jump from one part to another part without feeling either part. So, if some part of you is feeling dismissed, and you don't quite know what to do with that, or you don't have a framework of what to do with that, you start looking for ways to jump out of it. And then you'll just jump to the part of you that's like, well, no. They've supported me a lot over time, so it's okay. And that's a little bit of a rationalization. And so in Bio-Emotive, we want to find that part that's feeling the feeling and let it feel it all the way through. And then once it's got the release, it starts to naturally integrate with the more rational, intelligent, or wiser self. Usually it starts to happen on its own. And then finally, what I'll say is even if technically there might be truth in how this isn't quite perfect, in experience, like it just works. And that's part of what this whole framework is based on, is following it just really, really, really works. And so that's why we go along with this. But here's what I'll do. I'll get everyone to pull out pens and papers or a place on the computer for you to explore this with me, and I'll give us some exercises, okay? So at the top of a page, there's a few different ways you can enter into this exercise, but at the top of the page, if you wouldn't mind just writing out a situation or a scenario, some sort of conflict. In this case, let's make it an interpersonal conflict. Write out an interpersonal conflict that you're having with somebody and bring that into your mind's eye. And yes, we'll keep this part recorded. Yeah. So write that out and just give me a little wave when everyone's done writing out this first part. And the next step is just write out, how do you know that you're activated? How do you know that this is bothering you? Do you bicker? Do you fight with this person? Do you run away from them? Maybe you're aware of your body. You notice that you get a tense feeling in your stomach, or you feel sick every time you see them. What are some signs of activation that you have when you're navigating this conflict with this person? And I'm going to keep following the levels of differentiation here. You can write out, what are some of the stories you have about them? These are they, you statements, they just need to learn how to contain their emotions better. Or it could be opinions or a series of events, values and beliefs. What stories do you see that could be contributing to why this issue is an issue between you guys? So I'll have everyone take a breath or two, and you're going to read your story, your situation out loud. And as you read it out loud, I want you to check for resonance. You're going to say to yourself on mute, in this situation, I feel sad. And on a scale of 1 to 10, see how sad you feel. Oh, in this situation, I'm feeling afraid. Check for your body. Does it like flutter up? Does it say, yeah, that totally feels true? Or like, a little bit. Scale of 1 to 10. Or on the situation, I feel angry. So take a breath, read your situation out loud to yourself, and then check for resonance. what emotion feels most true. So part of what we're learning here is our body actually is telling us. Is everyone feeling, oh yeah, each of these words is actually doing something different to me? Can I get a show of hands? Are you guys kind of seeing what I'm pointing to generally? Okay, good. So staying with the breath, staying with this now sensitivity and kind of paying attention to the core of the body. I want you to go through now, pick, you know, four or five of the interpersonal feelings that you want to try out, okay? And just say out loud, I'm feeling humiliated by so and so. And just check to see if that resonates. Now, interpersonal feelings, we don't have an exhaustive list. So if there's any other feelings that you want to try, I encourage you to just try them. But we're testing for resonance. What interpersonal feelings could be hidden inside of this situation that you might not have been aware of? And give me a show, no rush when you're feeling complete with that portion. So now just check in, okay? Choose a couple of those interpersonal feelings and just say, to yourself, it works best if you do this out loud and not just in your head. And that's a big part of the teaching that I won't get into. But, when I'm feeling dismissed by this person, it brings up feelings of insignificance, or it makes me feel insignificant. And just check to see, scale of 1 to 10, how much does that resonate? When I'm feeling dismissed, it makes me feel worthless, or it brings up feelings of worthlessness. And just check. And sometimes you'll know if it resonates because your body relaxes or a breath happens, or the opposite happens. You start to actually get more tense. And tension is also a sign of activation. It just means it's the other side. You're kind of resisting it. And for this portion, when you guys are ready, I think we'll open it up to a little bit of dialogue. I'm just interested in your process, and then we'll send you into breakout rooms for one more exercise that you guys can do in pods. But what are you guys seeing as you try this? What are you noticing, learning? Was anyone surprised to discover that there were some feelings that were maybe present in the situation that you weren't quite aware of?
Could read a couple of things in the chat.
Oh, I'm not seeing that. Please
Yeah,
do.
don't worry. I got you.
Thank you.
Yin Ching wrote, no catharsis so far. So maybe you could say something about like what that process, because it to me, because knowing that I've done some of this work with you, it's like we're just kind of mapping the terrain a little bit, but not necessarily like really going deep into it yet.
No, right now, so basically a catharsis is taking the resonance that you're feeling and us following it into deeper layers until there's a sense of safety and aha and connecting the dots that the body really lets go into it. So if your catharsis sometimes happens a little bit more easily when you're like already very activated, you're already like kind of feeling the things, and then we bring it in and dissect it and help you release it once you're already in it. Bringing up a previous thing that's not currently activated, sometimes it takes a little bit more work to kind of get dropped in. But basically, catharsis is, in our world, just a level 5 cry, which is resonance at its deepest state that you could have. And yeah, I'm not going there. Too many people on the call online with people that I don't know. So it's a container. It's a conscientious thing on my part.
Ryan wrote, I felt the wave of emotions when I spoke out loud. So I think this is touching on like how actually saying it helps, create the resonance to really feel it more.
Yeah, as soon as we start speaking it out loud, we get the vagus nerve involved, and the vagus nerve is our resonance nerve in the body. When we're just thinking it in our mind's eye, this is how people talk and talk and talk and think, and you're obsessing over things and blah, blah, blah. Rumination, it's the thought, the ruminating thoughts is a sign that your emotional system is activated and you're staying in story or signs of activation. And you have to figure out what are the interpersonal and core feelings and or feeling beliefs that are getting triggered. So feeling beliefs are basically if you are shown by your family that you're insignificant enough times, you're going to start having a feeling belief about who you are and your place in the world, and it's deep insignificant and you're deep insignificance. And then if you believe that you're insignificant and you're showing up to situations where you're confident that you're insignificant, you might not be even able to pick up on people's cues that they're treating you with significance because your feeling belief is so deeply distorting your ability to perceive reality. And so we want to be able to remove these cognitive distortions by not just talking our way and telling us the right, everyone loves you, can't you see? We have to go back and actually go, oh my gosh, I have these deep feelings of insignificance. This is how I've been interpreting things for so many years. This is where it came from, right? And we might track family lineage stuff. You know, my own parents were feeling insignificant, and this is how they dealt with it. And you start working it through and loosening it up and releasing it. So then there's space to update your impressions. And now you can actually start being in a world where you can receive the possibility that maybe you could be significant and valued by people, right? But we have to get rid of those feeling beliefs first and figure out where they came from or what impressions had created those beliefs in you or these blueprints in the first place.
Couple more things over here. Adam writes, I'm noticing the feelings I would have guessed are different from the actual ones with resonance. And Beth says, me too. I thought abandoned, but it's really closer to neglected.
Beautiful. I couldn't have asked for something more perfect. This is why it's a resonance testing process. This is not an intellectual process. We're literally going, hey, body, are you feeling insignificant right now? And oftentimes, what happens, especially when we're used to working with stories or changing our narratives, we get an idea in our head about what our trauma is or what the issue is. And then we just assume that that's the source of our issue. But when you learn to follow the body and its subtle resonances towards and away certain truths, it will actually take you to what's really going on. But it takes practice. But when people are having repeat issues or they're crying all the time and there isn't resolution, to me, that's a sign a little part of your intellect is interfering with the resonance testing process. We really need to follow the feelings in the body and not your ideas about what the feelings probably are. So again, it takes practice.
I have a
Okay.
question.
Oh, please, yes.
I have a question about the feeling beliefs, because something that you said about it made sense to me, and I just want to check it. So in my situation, the intellect and the story I have about it is that it's abandonment, but it's really much, much closer to neglect. And what you just said about feeling beliefs landed because there is the part that feels neglected, and then there's a part that knows that that's not actually present and currently happening. Like it's completely the filter that I'm running this through that's automatic. So are you saying that in order to address the feeling belief level, you sort of wait for a moment, sort of when this is activated, and then try to work with it and try to really feel into the neglect as fully as possible and just take that to when it might resolve?
Yeah, exactly. So This is that perfect example. So now you have to say, okay, there is some part of me that feels neglect, even though I know it's not true. I'm going to get curious about this and I'm going to give space for it, right? It's okay to have felt neglected, even if I know I wasn't neglected. And as you sit with that, so literally you're now going, oh, like I'm actually admitting that some part of me feels neglected. Ooh, that's scary. The breath starts to happen, right? This is your nervous system is going, yes, I'm resonating. Thank you. And as you sit with that, it could just be sensation, stretching, crying could happen, or the language of the emotional system is image and association. So you might be going, neglect. Oh, this image is coming up. I I remember this one time, when my mom looked away when I was asking for her help. And ooh, there was something in that moment. And then you explore it, right? But you feel the neglect to its depths and you sit with the possibility that maybe there's something deeper.
Yeah. Can you say more about the disassociation? Because I have aphantasia and I sort of have very no imagery at all, or
Okay.
and it affects memory as well. But say more about disassociation because I think that
Yeah.
so following that line of like neglect and you wait for a moment where something feels good
Yes.
that you
Okay.
can lean into it.
So what could happen is you're realizing there's a part of me that feels neglected. And basically disassociation, you might say at that time, the depth of activation in my body was actually so much that I had to cut it off real quick and dissociate into my fantasy world or dissociate into, whatever it is. So dissociation is basically this is too much. I don't have the capacity to sit with this intensity. I don't have a framework to make sense of it, right? I mean, in so many ways, what a great skill. Great, this is too much. I'm going to tune out so that I can still have a relationship with the people that are taking care of me, even though they're kind of, neglecting and abusing me, but I don't really have any other options. So I'm just going to not notice it. And it's just going to, live in my body and kind of come up and make me a little bit weird sometimes in this situation and that situation. But for the most part, I can keep eating and sleeping and getting my needs met. Right. And in some ways, that's the healthy thing to do if you don't actually have people that can work this out with you. And sometimes there is wisdom to, cool, now I'm, in my 20s or 30s or 40s, and now I'm going to actually go back and try to open this stuff up because I have a container, you know, to do some of this reflective work. And the culture has changed so much. You know, there was a time it was not safe to be suggesting, especially and still, you have to be really careful. Just because, interpersonally, you might want to name, I'm feeling neglected, but the other person's going to hear, I neglected you. Absolutely, I didn't. You got to be really careful. No, 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 no. I'm just working with a feeling. Right. And sometimes it's better to try to work with those feelings with the people who weren't directly involved, because if they don't have this framework, they're just feeling accused. They cannot hear the subtle difference between I feel neglected and you did neglect me. Um, there is one, yeah. So I have one more exercise we could do, or we can just kind of keep the dialogue going. Artem, what do you think? Group, what do you guys think?
Did you want to do a breakout room thing or?
I have it available. I know that the time frame is shifted, so it's It's up to you guys.
Yeah, I guess whoever's for the breakouts, raise your hand.
What do you think, Artem? About half and half?
It's hard to track who had their hands up, and some people have their cameras off, so I'm not exactly sure. I'm gonna let you make the decision, Ali.
Okay, guys. Okay, it'll be faster if we just keep everyone here and I just do it in the same style that we just did it. So let's do that instead. Okay. So this might be a little bit tough, guys, but brace yourself. It is very useful. Okay. So you can use the same situation or you can have a different situation. But, well, let's use the same situation. Okay. So now ask yourself, what interpersonal feeling and core feeling is that person feeling? Not that you know, but what guesses could you have that they have been feeling? And I invite you to, notice how your own body feels when you go, what could they be feeling? Sometimes there's a bit of a fear response. It could be a little bit scary. It can be relieving too. Oh, yeah, they're feeling things too. So now, based on the wisdom of you knowing your feelings that could be activated, but more importantly, I'm going to say based on the wisdom of guessing what feelings they could be feeling, how could you use this information to shift your approach in the conflict? And write that down. So this brings us basically to the discussion. How could the world change if, because the next layer, right, is when you're looking at high level issues in the world, right? Like when I see, the racism happening, when I see the climate challenges happening, when I see this happening, we then start going, well, what feelings am I feeling? Where am I sensitive already to feeling inadequate? What feelings can I update so that I can be a little bit more effective in how I'm navigating the issues?
I yeah, I like the exercise of trying to guess what the other person was feeling in the conflict. And when I look at my conflict, that still doesn't help me in terms of figuring out what do I do to navigate it. And I can share more of like why it feels hard to navigate it, but yeah, I'm not sure. Even if I know, and I think part of it also has to do with this factor of shame. And then when people feel shame, it's like they don't necessarily want to explore it, so that it could be like a shutdown kind of thing. And that's like how do you navigate that? And it's like a lot of times in these kind of conflicts and dynamics, there is some level of shame with something.
Well, I'd be interested, like, on talking about it on that level. I don't know if we want to stay recording or take it off, but I think it's probably worth exploring, because yeah, there's usually something that we can, this is what I call insight oriented, where we're really trying to like understand the patterns that are going on. Um,
I,
but
I
that's a great, yeah,
Yeah, I feel comfortable just sharing, like even in the recording. Like I could share more if that would be helpful. I
please.
shared a little bit about the conflict in like our group, but basically a friend I was talking to a friend, like he was asking me a question about something, and I think I might have he asked me about this before and we had this conversation, so I kind of responded like your memory is pretty bad, and he does have like pretty bad memory. And the way I was saying it, I was seriously like I was like concerned, and I was just kind of responding. And afterwards we just kept talking, and he was saying something about me not responding like quick enough, and like it took me like an hour and a half to respond. And I was like, oh, okay, next time I'll make sure to hold my phone the whole time. So I was being sarcastic, and he didn't like my sarcasm, and he was like, "Oh, I'm not going to entertain your nonsense. Have a nice day," and that was it. And then the next day, I attempted to, speak to him about this and to have a conversation. Like, hey, can we just kind of hop on a FaceTime? I was curious to see what happened, like what I actually did that bothered him, and he was like, "Oh, it's not a big deal. I don't want to talk about it." And then, but for me, it bothered me that he just kind of shut down the conversation and had this big kind of reaction, which felt to me like he kind of was like, he vented his frustration on me and then kind of shut the door. Well, I'm closing this conversation. There's nothing else to say. And so then we basically ended up texting, which I didn't want to do because a lot gets lost in texting. I wanted to talk to him face to face. And he didn't really want to hear what I was saying. He was, oh, it's not a big deal what happened to me. He was kind of minimizing and dismissing it from my perspective. And then I was like, well, it did bother me. And he didn't want to hear it until I was like, well, like I kind of feel dismissed and I feel like you don't want to hear what's happening for me. And then he was like, okay, well, how did you experience it? And then when I started telling him how I experienced it, trying to use very like NVC type of language, like really just owning things, he didn't like that, and he just went and started kind of venting how he felt, and so that, and it kind of didn't go anywhere. So I don't know if there's any insights that you could throw at me.
Yeah, well, I would get really clear on what's the outcome that you actually would like, and then, and I mean, like a full-on relational thing, is not this class, but get really clear on what you actually would have liked. And then something that I do is, what is between me and making peace with the fact that this isn't happening? And so when you ask yourself, like, what's between me and making peace with the crappy thing, or the thing that I don't like, it usually can show us where our values are and where certain interpersonal or personal sensitivities are, that are kind of like part of us. And then, maybe you still decide, no, I need to pursue this. But again, you continue to just do it with a little bit more wisdom. Yeah. I don't know if that's, I mean, getting really clear, like I'm feeling cut off, or I'm feeling dismissed, and I'm, afraid of losing a friendship, or, I mean, a lot of those. I want to go into it, but I do find it really helpful to just be like, get really clear on what you wish would happen and what's between me and making peace with it not happening. And usually it helps me to find my own work. And Bio-Emotive very much is helpful for you clearing your stuff before bringing it to an interpersonal situation. There's entire things in actually navigating interpersonal dynamics in actual live communication, which, we're like a piece of that whole thing. But this is at least coming to the table with yourself. But let's open that up to others. Like, was this helpful? Knowing some of your inner landscape and guessing other people's? And I'd love for you to verbally speak it just so that I could have some more contact. Yeah, Stephen.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, I found that very useful, the last conversation you had, because it was great to at least try and second guess what. I could just give you the simple situation with my boss. We have a new boss. He was telling me and my team what we should do. So I asked him, well, what's your contribution? At that point, the conversation seemed to stumble quite seriously. And from my point of view, I felt dismissed, and so on. And I should imagine from his point of view, he felt humiliated because we've got a very hierarchical culture. And therefore, I could have addressed that with a lot more wisdom than I actually did at that moment in time, because I pursued it. So I thought key to the conversation you had with Artem was addressing that situation with a lot more wisdom than I would have done, in that meeting. Because I was just getting a bit frustrated with what, he was telling us what to do, but not adding anything to the party. So great. Yeah, thanks for that. Really useful, Ali.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
I'll chime in, Ali. I liked flipping the tables because for me, what it did was it gave me access to some compassion and some empathy for their side. And I kind of realized pretty quickly in that moment that I was totally on the defense. And so there wasn't any space for those two qualities. And as soon as I started to think about them and how they're feeling, I actually got really sad that like I was a part of making them feel that way. And so then instantly that made this a more connective thing for me without even talking to them or being around them. I wanted to be more connected instead of just being on the defense and taking care of myself. It actually brought them back into the fold, which felt really powerful.
Beautiful. So part of what I'm hearing is I started to actually enter into a rest and relaxation response rather than being in a fight flight response. Like being able to tune in what could happen to them brings in the relational oxytocinal level, and I can actually start to soften and feel the potential for a relationship, whereas fight flight is pushing away. So that's wonderful. Yeah. And just going back, Artem, this could be an example, right? Like sarcasm. Some people are really sensitive to sarcasm, and other people, it's like a normal way of communicating, right? And so how does someone shut down under that? Possibly. And then you're saying, well, hey, I want to repair, but he, might not have the framework or understanding that repair is even possible, right? And that's where education or witnessing it in the first place is often the first door. That's why a lot of people like the Bio-Emotive framework, is because it's like a really good rational reason to explain to people why it's okay to feel feelings. And once they have that framework that feels so like reasonable, they'll give themselves permission to actually feel something. But without that framework, going inwards is way too scary for a lot, because they know that they've got scary stuff inside, right? And then that's where having, safe spaces where it's like, no, you actually can explore all of these different parts of yourself, the part of you that hates me, the part of you that loves me, the part of you that this and that. Like that's a good therapeutic container or a really good group container. Just saying it's okay to have these different parts, let alone let's process the different parts.
Yeah, I think, the thing that comes up is that I imagine that everybody on this call has done some of this work in some way or another, or they're interested in processing emotions and working on their relationships and doing this kind of communication. And not everybody wants to do that. And so I realized, like, actually in my conflict, I was really curious about if what I was doing was actually like an ongoing pattern that I might have been doing in this relationship, and I was willing to explore that, and I actually wanted feedback on like, well, is this something that I've been doing, and you actually never mentioned it before, and now it's all coming out. But then I imagine like, that's the whole thing, like when people have a strong reaction from a rational standpoint, it's like, well, why did I just explode? Well, like that was, and then there's shame. It's like, I shouldn't feel this way. And right. And then it's like, let's minimize it. I don't even want to look at it. Right. So then I realize for a lot of people don't want to necessarily explore their triggers and stuff like that, or they don't want to look at it in connection. So, it's kind of like this goes to our meaning makings. It's like, what is our meaning making and how do we deal with conflict? How do we deal with emotions? Like for me, it's really important. Like if we do have a riff, there might be some personal stuff that I have to process myself, but I also feel like there's a component of it that's relational, that repair requires that kind of relational thing, rather than, okay, we'll just forget about it and not talk about it and move on. So that's kind of like what comes up for me in this conflict.
And I have had to really learn, like, for some people, like, that's like, just ignore it and move on is repair. Like, they don't have the frameworks, they don't have the inner scaffolding, they don't have the experience of something going well, and it's the best that they've got. And yeah, it is. And this is part of the meta crisis. This is part of the meaning crisis. We have, everybody is coming from such vastly different perspectives that we don't have shared narratives anymore about how to live and how to deal with problems. And it's extraordinarily complex, especially in the self-development world where everyone's taking all these trainings, and we're so used to being able to, like, unpack little nuances, and our nervous system just gets to feel so good because we repaired everything. And then it's so jarring to be with people who are like, what are you talking about? Right? And that brings it in its own level of challenge now, right? Because people know of this utopia, this emotional utopia that's available, and other people aren't in it with them. Can I get a couple more people sharing thoughts, ideas, musings, challenges?
I could jump in with that.
Please.
This is really helpful because when we did the second part of the exercise, how do they feel? I could list it and I could cross check it in my memory with what they've actually said. Like, yeah, this is close. And I'm like, okay, now I'm back at the starting point, because when it broke down with this friend, I had been upholding the relationship by feeding in what they needed and, like, being the mother in the relationship with this friend. But they want to preserve that. And when it's like, well, these things aren't working, and expressing myself, then I get that shutdown, like you're just describing, with, now I understand that they don't have that scaffolding. And I don't think I really did either, but I've just been stumbling my way through it and learning little bits as I go. So this is so helpful. But then because I'm excessively patient, then how long would someone tolerate this cycle without the other person stepping up?
Mm-hmm. So I can't speak directly. I don't totally understand the situation that you're in, but I think what's being pointed to is, what do we do when we realize that we've been in a dysfunctional relationship, or a relationship that's one-sided, or no longer, serving or working with what I'm needing? Okay. And what I'm suggesting basically is, well, there may be a growth piece where, okay, we do need to set boundaries, or we do need to create separation. And if that's the case, you might have some work to do around that. But if that's the case, can I set these boundaries and communicate these boundaries in a way that can be compassionate, and ideally in a way that can be received by the other person? So you might say something like, I've been reviewing what happened between us, and though I, continue to feel upset about how this went, and I do need changes to happen in our relationship, I can also see that, you might have been feeling really dismissed and unacknowledged when I blah, 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 blah. And I just want you to know that I hear that. or you could say, and I want to check, like, does that feel true? And depending on who they are, that, it might be too scary. But oftentimes if you say, I imagine you were probably feeling dismissed and when I blah, 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 and I recognize that, people's first instinct is usually, yeah, of course I feel dismissed. Or like, yes, thank you for acknowledging me. Or no, I wasn't dismissed. I was bloody, screwed over by you. And the truth is there, but the dialogue starts to open up. So again, so in setting boundaries, it might be, wow, I'm reviewing what happened between us, and I can see that these are the things that I'm needing, but I definitely can put myself in your shoes. And I imagine that you'd be feeling this, this, and this. And so I just want to acknowledge that, even if we're having to now take separation from each other. I can see how you might have been feeling that way. And for that piece, I am sorry. But though I'm sorry, you might still say, I still have to set this boundary. I still can't talk with you, 4 times a day or whatever it is. But it just creates a little bit more opportunity for less explosion in a disagreement or in the conflict, and a little bit more room for softening the situation so that maybe some resolve or some shared reality could start to get found.
Thank you, Ali. That's really insightful.
I find with relationships, there always has to be someone who is like the sacrificial person, who will just say, like, you know what? I see that you probably felt this, this, and this, and I'm sorry that that happened. In order for the other person to come down a notch and maybe be willing to engage with how you also felt. But usually relationships go better rather than saying, hey, this is how I was feeling. It is usually easier and more effective when you can say, hey, I'm just thinking about this conflict, and probably you were feeling this, this, and this when I said this, and I just want to acknowledge that. But again, it takes that little bit of sacrifice, that little bit of putting your own real truth that is true aside for a moment to kind of build the possibility of that bridge. Now, again, this is not the seminar on this, but doing that works. And then if you're noticing that the other person seems to be incapable of doing the same, that's when you start realizing maybe there's some personality disorders happening, or a developmental stage where they're just in a different phase of life and value system than you. And they're just not quite up to the task of meeting you where you are. So I think what I'm saying is sometimes when we get compassionate, we create room to get abused because we're constantly creating the possibility of being gentle and room for dialogue. Emotional processing and self-awareness is really not supposed to be a place to have that permission, but it can take a while for you to figure out if you're in a dynamic. When you're learning to have shared language and shared feeling language, it can take a while to figure out, is this person ever going to be willing to talk about their feelings or acknowledge how I'm feeling? I'm always the one acknowledging how they feel. Right. And then, that's where there comes a point in a relationship where you just have to assess, like, can we be in this relationship anymore? Is there enough actual shared framework for us to communicate with each other? And if there isn't, you realize, okay, I have to leave the relationship, whatever type it is, then you might have your own fears. Well, I'm afraid if I leave this relationship, I'm no longer going to be significant in my community. And you can do a whole level of processing there, right? Why am I afraid of creating this distance? Why am I afraid of creating this space? And that opens up its own little portal of self-exploration. Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
I wonder if anybody else has anything else they want to say, any comments they want to throw in before we wrap it up.
Thanks for being here, putting this container together, Artem and Ali, for your time. I got a lot out of it, and I'll be taking a deeper dive on my own time, checking this stuff out. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate you coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Ali, I appreciate this. I feel like I just want to say something. I feel like this work is so important, especially how it pertains to, relational practice, which we've both been really engaged in, maybe other people on this call, and also kind of spiritual practice. And I think there's something that, like spirituality or like kind of transcendence, there's something that's exciting about that, or there's something that's like more exciting about like relational practice, circling, relateful, that kind of stuff. But there's, this is like, hard work, like emotional processing and actually like feeling this stuff, and the therapeutic work and the emotional work and this kind of personal work is tough, but it really helps everything else work better. Because even like meditating, like if you have all this pent up emotions in your body, you can't actually relax. Or in like relational practice, if you're not processing your material, you're constantly coming, and I see this all the time in circling, there's always these huge triggers. So it's important to have kind of this space and this kind of practice where you can clear emotions. It's also like, it's something about metabolizing, right? It's this energy. We're always feeling emotions. And like, I'm feeling a lot of emotions in a lot of situations with kids, with my wife, with work and all that stuff. And if I'm not taking the time to process it, I'm actually carrying it with me. So I really appreciate the work you're doing. I really appreciate this practice because it allows us to actually transform in our interpersonal connections, interpersonal practices, and also to go deeper into our spiritual practices, into meditation and things like that.
Yeah, thank you. I'll say, like we have a practice space for this. We don't right now do it interpersonally. But right now I run a group regularly. So if it's something, that you're like, oh, I want to practice this, like send me a message or whatever. Because the reality is not everyone has a practice space to actually figure out what is going on. And so that's one of the things that we're also just trying to provide, aside from the theory, is like the ability to actually do something with it. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I'll add links and I'll send out a follow-up email with the recording for everybody so they'll have access to all of that.
Great.
Yeah, it was just quickly, Ali, you hold online sessions and courses. Are they at kind of this time of the day, in the evening or during the day? I'm based in the UK, that's all.
Yeah. So usually when I'm running the crash course, usually it's 1 to 3 or like my time. So it's basically now or like an hour later.
Yeah, great.
Yeah. We do our best to keep it in that time frame. And then we have a daytime one and an evening one to serve both time zones for the actual membership.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Yeah, we try our best. Sometimes you're doing stuff 8 o'clock at night, but yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, I appreciate it. And may everyone keep doing their good work.
Yes. Thank you, Ali.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody, for showing up. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.